Welcome to Ask the AstroShaman number 2. I'm recording this right at the end of January 2019. I'm Benjamin Bernstein with astroshaman.com. We have two questions that came in this time. One about why am I not married? One woman asks, and the other woman wants to know about how two men that she's in love partnership with at the same time, what is the deal with the fact that her North Node conjoins both of their natal Saturns? So we're going to explore these astrological topics today. The first question, why am I not married yet, comes from Harish, and she is born July 3, 1963, 9:15 p.m. in Delhi, India. So now, obviously, I can't definitively answer why are you not married, but what I can do is I can look at the astrological factors and see possible reasons why that might be the case. Now, again, the facts on the ground are beyond my knowledge, so I'll just speak of what seem to be like the greatest potentials of why this might be the case. And thus, if you understand what those are and you want to work and have those show differently, then maybe you could get married. So those are all possibilities. So again, these Ask the Astro Shaman videos are very simple. I'm not going to put up charts or anything like that, but I'll try to verbally describe the relevant things. I just post these and put them up. So Harish, one thing I'm noticing about your 7th house, which is the house of marriage, is that Leo is on the cusp. And because you're saying you're not married, I'm going to put all these things into a sort of a negative frame as to why would some of these archetypes have expressed in a way that would have prevented that. They all have positive upsides too. But because of the nature of your question, I'm going to take that tack to try to help you understand how these might have shown up in a more challenging way. With Leo on the descendant, it's possible that you may have attracted men who were egocentric, vain, or self-centered, too self-centered to commit to someone else. So that is a low expression of Leo there. Also in your 7th house, you have the planets Uranus. You know what? I'm going to go ahead and each time I do one of these, I'm going to actually give you the high side potential just to reinforce the idea that none of these have to be bad. You could have a Leo partner who comes up. A less evolved Leo is very self-centered. They have a big gaping hole inside them, and they need lots of energy from others to make them feel full up of energy because they don't have enough of their own internally sourced. Once a person does internally source enough energy, especially if they connect with their own inner divine, then they're overflowing with life force. And that sort of Leo, the more evolved version, would happily give that overflow to others. So I would say, Harish, if you do want to get married, then find a man or a partner, I don't know what your gender preference is, a person who's very strong in their own vitality, has it overflowing, and has it to spare, basically, and wishes to share it with others. Also, I'm noticing in your 7th house are the planets Uranus and Pluto. This is, of course, Western astrology, and I am using the Porphyry house system. Uranus and Pluto conjunct in the 7th house is a pretty powerful signature. Uranus and Pluto together are the signature of revolutionary transformation. They were conjoined in the 60s, and you, in fact, are born in 63, slightly before they came together. So to have that signature in the house of relationships says revolutionary transformation is going to be a hallmark of your partnerships. And it very often, I've seen many times with the clients I've worked with, when they had the Uranus-Pluto together and it was tied into a relationship, they tended to have a series of partnerships because it's such a strong energy. Anyone who has to stand in and hold those Uranus-Pluto energies for another person has to be an agent of revolutionary change for them. And since most humans cannot hold that energy consistently long-term for another person, what tends to happen is it's either, it often turns into serial monogamy where, you'll attract one partner who brings intense change to you, and that lasts a while, and then they fall away. They've catalyzed what they were supposed to, and then the next person comes in, the revolving door comes again, and there's a series of people who come into your life to catalyze you. And that, I don't know if that's what's happening for you, because all I know about you is you asked why you're not married. But if you were to want a long-term partner, then you would need a partner who holds this incredible power of revolutionary transformation in them and they can hold it consistently. What that means is they'd have to be evolving along a rate comparable to yours, so that they'll still able to catalyze you. In other words, they can't just stay the same and give you the same catalyst constantly, because eventually you get what you need from that, and their function for being there would go away. So a person who's evolving constantly, and assuming you are too, that would be a recipe for an intense transformative partnership that could be long-term. I hope that made some kind of sense there. Now, let's look further. I'm going to drink some water here. Let's look at the ruling planet of your 7th house. Leo is ruled by the sun. Your sun is in the sign of Cancer, and it's in the 5th house. Now, the sign of Cancer is not a problem. It just means loving and nurturing, and that's obviously a wonderful quality to have in a partnership. But it suggests that your partner should have a loving, nurturing quality. And if it's a male, then he needs to be in touch with his feminine side. The sun in the 5th house, again, this is tricky when you've got Leo on the 7th house cusp. This sun represents both the core of you and the core of the partner, so it interprets both ways. Again, because of your question, I'm going to put this sun in terms of the partner, because it's really the house of relationship. 5th house is the house of new romance, also the house of, sometimes called the house of sport sex. It's possible that you might attract partners who enjoy an initial fling but are not in it for the long term. There's several houses that relate to relationship. 4 through 8 actually all have their own relationship meanings. And again, if you tend to attract partners who enjoy the first flush of romance, but they tend to go away once the initial excitement wears off and they're not in it for the long term, then that obviously could lead to a non-married state. So you need to find partners who are in it for the long term and not just enjoying the initial flirtation or the initial flush of romance. The sun also has a square to Jupiter. Now the sun has many harmonious aspects as well, but here again I'm focusing still on what are the potentials. Jupiter, among its needs, is the need for freedom and expansion. So you may also be attracting partners who need a lot of freedom, and either they need so much freedom they're not willing to commit, or they're not perceiving that they would have enough freedom in partnership with you and thus are not going to commit. So what that freedom looks like is going to be different for each person, but the partner's need for some freedom with a square to Jupiter is a factor there. Also, the planet Neptune has a pretty strong role to play here. I'm looking now at Neptune. It very powerfully squares your descendant. It's less than 1 degree off by square. Neptune also makes a sesquare 135 degrees to your Venus, and Venus is the natural ruler relationship for everyone. So Neptune makes hard or semi-hard contact twice in your chart, and this brings out another potential issue. One thing is that you might be focused on Neptune things that tend to exclude a partner. If you're, for example, very intense on your spiritual path and you're more interested in that than a partner, that could run interference with it. Or Neptune could be inspired creativity. If you're artistic and your real passion is artistry, and that's juicier for you than a partner, that could also be a potential challenge. Also, I named some high Neptune qualities, but Neptune can also go low. On the low side, if you or the partner are embodying any of the following qualities in a significant measure, that could, make it difficult to move into marriage. One is if there's any issue with substance abuse or excessive escapism, or if you tend to fall into victim-perpetrator dynamics in relationship, or there's just a sense of aimlessness and drifting, not really motivated enough to seek the partner, those would be low Neptunian expressions. And again, since Neptune has these challenging contacts to relationship, point, theme, and planet, those are potential sticky points too. The final possible reason why you haven't been married that is a frontline astrological explanation is, again, the sun, your ruler of relationship, is loosely conjunct the north node of the moon, which is what the other person asked about. But again, the relationship planet conjunct the north node says perhaps you're not willing to settle for someone unless you really feel like it's destined, unless you feel like there is a soul connection here. You're not willing to have just a good enough partner to get by with and to have basic needs met. It's saying, wow, you're not going to connect and marry someone until you feel like there's a genuine soul bond there. So those are the things that seem the most likely. There are other things I could go into at subtler levels, but those are some possible reasons why marriage has not happened for you yet. But I will also hasten to add, there's no reason you can't have a lovely partnership with this chart. And I'm going to close your question by just giving a brief description of what that ideal partner would look like on the high side. I'm going to paint the rosiest possible picture from your chart. With Leo on the descendant, a warm, loving, loyal person who is so connected to his own vitality and divine self that he overflows energy to you. He enjoys having your attention so he can shower you with love and good energy. And I'll use the male gender just by default here, and no offense meant to anyone who prefers a same-sex partner. Actually, no, I'm just going to keep it they. My apologies for slipping into a gender mode there. In the 7th house, this partner with Uranus there is unique, one of a kind. They get great intuitive flashes. They're very service-oriented to others. With Pluto there, they're passionate, intense. They love connecting with you deeply and intimately and honestly. Excuse me. And Mars and Pluto, I didn't mention Mars because it's very late in the house, but there's a Mars-Pluto conjunction. So this also says this person, you can have awesome sacred sex with them, blending your light bodies as well as your physical bodies. The Sun-Jupiter square, which I earlier talked about, oh, they need too much independence, could be, wow, we have the high side of Jupiter working. We have euphoria and joy and celebration and expansive, wonderful energy. Chiron trine the Sun. The partner can act as a mentor and healer. Neptune trine, the high side of Neptune, we have this amazing blending together that we just feel like our souls merge together so easily. Pluto sextile, that's when I get Pluto again, bringing the beautiful depth of connection and deep honesty and sacred sexuality. So those are some of the wonderful possibilities of the ruler's aspects. Aspects to the descendant itself. There's Neptune again, which I mentioned. And I'm not going to go, those are fairly minor and thus wouldn't require strong commentary. But Venus, the planet of relationship for everyone, again in Gemini, conjunct Mercury, saying this partner also have fantastic communication, easy flow. Venus trine Saturn, nice endurance and consistency in the connection. Just checking for any other really notable connections. So those are just a few of the ideas of the qualities that would be possible with the ideal partner. So I want to emphasize as I close your question, Harish, that your chart does not prevent you from having a long-term partner. One last thing I'll note, I'm just seeing here, of all the relational houses, the 5th house has 3 planets. I mean, Venus, Mercury, and the Sun. So not only the natural ruler of relationship, but the Sun, the 7th house ruler, is there. 5th house is the house of new love, new relationships. So ask yourself, do you so enjoy the initial phase of romance? I talked about this from the partner's perspective, but with this many personal planets in there, it could be your own predisposition. You're in love with falling in love, perhaps. And you are very excited in the first weeks or months of connection, but when that initial flush starts to wear off and the challenges start to come up, do you stick with it or do you walk away? With a loaded 5th house, some people would tend to just start again instead of holding the consistency. So just a final thought there. So thank you for that wonderful question, Harish. I hope this was helpful. And to you other watchers, I hope that was some helpful astrology thoughts for you. Our other question is from another person who did not actually give her name. She says her question is about a configuration in her chart with 2 partners, both of these men. I'll be gender proper now. It's a woman and in a relationship with men. Both of these men have their Saturn sitting directly on my North Node in Cancer at 18 degrees. And she gives her birth data in case you want to run charts. She is September 16, 1963, 8:36 p.m. Washington, D.C. First man who she's called just the letter A, October 30, 1974, 7:50 p.m. Apple Valley, California. And man number B, November 26, 1974, Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, 4:56 p.m. So it's worth noting these men are born less than a month apart in 1974. And of course, Saturn in this case was, man A, his Saturn is 31 minutes from her North Node. That's pretty much half a degree. And man B, his Saturn is only 7 minutes from her North Node, which is practically conjoined with it, almost exactly. So they're both very, very strong connections. She goes on, I'm a long-term partner with the first. The second and I were drawn together magnetically online, and it's now like I lead almost a parallel romantic life with this person for about 6 months. I've exposed him to ideas about past lives, and we both feel there's a fated feeling to our relationship. My main question of interest to everyone is to talk about the North Node and what it means in a romantic partnership, and especially when it's aspected in any way, but especially aspected by something as heavy as Saturn. We could also ask, would I feel a fated quality from any male born within the time period that would put Saturn in orbit of my North Node? So basically, the North Node is the point of destiny. North Node is, what you're moving toward in terms of life purpose in this lifetime. So it's a very important point to bring into consideration. So your North Node's in Cancer, and that means learning about love, learning about, opening the heart, connection, nurturing, maternal energy. So learning how to give nurturing, healing energy to others would be one of the topics of that North Node in Cancer. Now, Saturn has certain specific ways it would interact with the North Node. So Saturn, for starters, could be challenge. And what I've observed is all the planets tend to work for a person's higher self. So if Saturn on this person's chart is on your North Node, and you and that person have some unfinished karmic business, Saturn will definitely bring up the challenge so you can deal with that. So there is potential for challenge here. Now, if there's enough glue and good energy there to hold you together, nothing holds things together better than Saturn. Saturn is structure, it's the foundation. Saturn says, I want to build a really solid container for this. So if you're able to successfully work through any challenges that do arise, then having a good Saturn contact can be magical. So in this case, you've been with one person long term, the other you've held together at least 6 months anyway. So just know that Saturn, again, will be glue for you when the higher selves involved feel this is a good connection, and will bring up challenge either if the connection isn't working or should end, or if there's a challenge that needs to be worked through. Another quality of Saturn, it's one of its archetypes, is the wise elder. So a person who has a Saturn on your North Node may well have something to teach you. So be open to any wisdom that person may share. Regarding the question of would any male born in that time period with Saturn on your North Node, would you feel that fated quality? Unlikely. I actually did a little research, and Saturn, in orb, I'm going to take to mean within 3 degrees. That's the orb I use for transits. Or, well, actually, it would be a much larger orb for synastry. Even if we just use 3 degrees, though, in that period, 1974 to 1975, Saturn was in orb within 3 degrees of your North Node for 6 months during that frame. And of course, how many millions of men were born in that time frame? Good Lord. So I would consider it very unlikely that you would feel a fated quality from any male who's got Saturn on your North Node. That's just way too many guys to feel fated with every single one of them. I don't think anyone has a soul group that large. So I would not consider that a very likely possibility. Now, I did also, I need to also make the point here, one connection does not a relationship make. When I do synastry for my clients, my main tool for looking at their compatibility is a grid. It's called a synastry grid. And I have all of one of their planets running along the top. I use like, what do I use? 18 different points. And then the other person's points down the left side. So I've got this grid and it's got, several hundred points of intersection. So Saturn to the North Node is not the one thing you would go by any means, nor is just sun sign to sun sign something you would look at either. You would have to look at the entire grid. It's a very complex web of relationship, and you really need to know what you're doing. So my advice to people is, if you're not really well trained in astrology and you don't know how to do the technical aspects of synastry and really understand how what's called the interaspects from one person's planets to another in this complex web, if you don't really understand that, then you shouldn't even try to use astrology to determine compatibility. It's like, I've got a 300-piece jigsaw puzzle and I think I've got the whole puzzle figured out because I've got these one or two pieces I'm looking at. It's not enough information. So again, Saturn to the North Node is one interesting aspect to look at, and it's an important one. It's by no means the whole puzzle. What I find typically is the most juiciest things in synastry is personal planet to personal planet aspects, especially the sun, moon, and ascendant, and of course Venus. And also I pay a lot of attention when I've got a slower planet making a number of inner aspects to another person's personal planet. That's a very telling part of the synastry as well. So yeah, Saturn on the North Node is an interesting tiny piece of it, but you really need to have a well-trained astrologer do the whole synastry for a person if you're going to actually want to use astrology to determine is this a compatible person for me. It's a very technical thing that requires quite a bit of understanding. So I hope that was helpful to everyone who listened. So thank you very much. I do welcome all questions for Ask the AstroShaman that might relate to astrology or shamanism or spiritual awakening. Any of the stuff I'm into, I'm happy to address in these video segments. So you can do the Ask the AstroShaman, just pop me an email at info@astroshaman.com. Or if you get my newsletter, just reply to the newsletter with your question. Let me know it's an Ask the AstroShaman question, and I'll be happy to consider it for future videos. So thanks so much. I've had fun doing this, and I wish you all a wonderful everything.